Washington, D.C. is a city that runs on promises and paperwork. And recently, a very large piece of paperwork, filled with a great many promises, landed on the national stage. Republican leaders with beaming smiles and confident handshakes introduced their latest masterpiece. A sweeping piece of legislation they affectionately dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill. This wasn't just another minor adjustment to the federal budget, it was presented as a revolutionary roadmap for America's future. It was supposed to be the legislative equivalent of finally cleaning out that national garage that's been cluttered for decades. The central promise was nothing short of a complete economic revival, unleashing unprecedented growth. They promised it would unleash economic growth/wasteful government spending and restore fiscal responsibility. A second promise was the solemn pledge to slay the dragon of government waste. They told stories of government agencies spending absurd amounts of money on pointless studies or redundant programs. When the details began to emerge, one of the first areas to feel the sharp edge of the fiscal axe was education. A significant reduction was made to the Head Start program, which provides early learning, health, and nutrition services to young children from low-income families. The Pell Grant program saw its funding significantly curtailed, with frozen maximum awards and stricter eligibility requirements. This effectively made it harder for students from middle and lower-income backgrounds to qualify for aid. Perhaps no area was more profoundly impacted than healthcare. The legislation introduced fundamental changes to Medicaid. Medicaid is the single largest payer for long-term care in the United States, paying for nursing home care for millions of elderly Americans. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention saw its budget for disease prevention and emergency preparedness significantly reduced. This included cuts to programs that monitor infectious disease outbreaks and promote vaccination. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program underwent significant changes, with strict new work requirements for able-bodied adults. These changes effectively reduced the number of people eligible for food assistance, forcing tough choices between paying bills and buying food. Housing assistance programs were also significantly curtailed, with reduced funding for Section 8, Housing Choice Vouchers. This reduction meant fewer new vouchers would be issued, leading to longer waiting lists and increased risk of homelessness. The impact lands with particular force in rural and underserved communities, places with weaker local economies and smaller tax bases. Rural hospitals were already operating on razor-thin margins. When states are forced to cut Medicaid reimbursement rates, it can be a death sentence for a rural hospital. The elimination of community development block grants means the local health clinic can't expand, the water treatment plant can't be upgraded. The freedom from federal oversight becomes the freedom to let local infrastructure crumble. For students, the Big Beautiful Bill wasn't just a news headline, it was a direct hit to their wallets and their futures. The elimination of subsidized interest on student loans means the debt clock starts ticking from day one. The promise of higher education as an engine of opportunity begins to look more like a luxury good, available only to those who can afford the steep entry price. A student borrowing for their degree will now graduate with a significantly larger debt burden than before this bill. For seniors, a group that has spent a lifetime working and paying taxes, the bill has fundamentally altered the landscape of support systems. With states receiving fixed block grants that don't keep pace with rising healthcare costs, they face impossible choices about elderly care. Many seniors rely on Medicaid for home and community-based care, which allows them to stay in their own homes instead of moving to an institution. Reductions in community development block grants mean less money for senior centers that provide meals, social activities, and vital community connections. For working families, especially those with young children, the program cuts have added new layers of stress to an already difficult juggling act. When you take food assistance away from a family, they spend less money at the local grocery store, creating a ripple effect through the economy. The cumulative effect creates a cycle of instability. Without reliable childcare, a parent can't maintain a job. Without a steady job, they can't afford rent or food. These cuts lead to increased food insecurity and greater strain on local food banks and charities, which are not equipped to handle the increased demand. If you ask the Republican champions of the Big Beautiful Bill why they would do this, they give you a very serious answer that begins and ends with the national debt. They look at the national debt and see an existential threat to America's future, a ticking time bomb that will eventually destroy our economy. The supporters are true believers in supply-side economics, the idea that cutting government spending and taxes will unleash economic growth. A business owner, instead of paying higher taxes, can use that money to buy new equipment, open a new factory, or hire more workers. For every argument in favor of the big beautiful bill, there is a counter-argument, and critics have been lining up to offer them. Critics argue that the ticking time bomb narrative is a gross exaggeration designed to provide political cover for a radical ideological agenda. Critics make a powerful moral argument centered on compassion, dignity, and shared responsibility, viewing social programs as reflections of a decent society. They argue that in a wealthy nation like America, no child should go hungry, no senior should choose between medicine and rent. For those concerned about the impacts, there are concrete steps that can be taken. The first is to stay informed and use your voice. Call their offices, write emails and letters, attend town hall meetings and ask pointed questions about how these cuts affect your community. Support local nonprofit organizations that are now on the front lines, trying to fill the gaps left by federal cuts. Finally, the most powerful tool is the vote. Every election is an opportunity to choose representatives whose values align with your own. In the final analysis, we must weigh the grand promises of the big beautiful bill against the stark reality of its contents. The reality is far more complex and for many, far more bitter than the promises suggested. This is the crossroads where America now stands. The passage of this bill did not settle the debate, it intensified it. The future direction of the country is not set in stone, it is determined by who shows up and participates in our democracy. We must decide if we are a nation that believes in "you're on your own" or "we're all in this together." The question hangs in the air, waiting for our answer. The choices we make will determine which path we ultimately take toward a truly beautiful future for all.